Hello, I'm Tony Perkins. Welcome to the FRC headquarters here in Washington, D.C. I want to thank you for joining us for this national webcast entitled Mission Compromised, How the Military is Being Used to Advance a Radical Agenda. Congress is poised to overturn a long-standing law that prohibits homosexuality in the military based upon decades of evidence that makes clear homosexual behavior is incompatible with military service. And Congress is taking this action not at the advice of military leaders, but rather they're doing so against the advice of military leaders.
I do have serious concerns about the impact of the repeal of the law on a force that's fully engaged in 2 wars and has been at war for 8.5 years.
This is not the time to perturb the force that is at the moment stretched by demands in Iraq and Afghanistan.
My best military advice to this committee, to the Secretary, and to the President would be to keep the law such as it is.
Now, you might be tempted to ask the question, why is Congress doing this? With the unprecedented challenges that our military is facing today, a war in Iraq, and as of last month, the nation's longest-running war in Afghanistan, this demand is upon an all-volunteer military that has led to multiple tours of combat and a single enlistment. Given these facts, why would Congress do anything to disrupt the military's focus? Well, that's one of the questions that we will answer in the next hour as we're joined by members of Congress, former military leaders, and public policy experts.
There's an old saying in politics that when the ship sinks, the rats jump off. Well, this ship is sinking and the rats are jumping off. And so what is the last one to jump off? It would be on something that is the defense bill, the reauthorization bill. So they know this is something that has to pass. And so if they can get on there and do it behind closed doors, that's where they started out trying to do it, then they would use our military to advance their liberal agenda. I just got back from Iraq just a few days ago. And I can tell you, Tony, I can't get in with a bunch of enlisted men and women if they corner me and say, what is going on? We're supposed to have this study where they're going to come after and try to find out what our opinions were and what we thought about having an openly gay policy, about people using their liberal agenda, the military, to advance their liberal agenda. And we want to be heard. Now we find out that they're not going to have this study, or if they have this study, they've already decided how it's going to turn out.
Well, General, let me ask you about the statements from the Joint Chiefs. I mean, uniformly, the service chiefs have said this is not the time, or this is not a good policy, or keep it as it is. To some degree or another, they have expressed opposition. You've had some, very few military leaders besides the chiefs have also spoken out. Of course, they've kind of gotten slapped down when they've spoken out.
Yeah, sure.
No doubt you have been in communication with military leaders. What are you hearing? What are they saying about this?
They're clearly not happy. I spoke to one of the service chiefs just 10 days ago. We were at a conference together. Not only are they articulating the reasons you and I discussed, but they also feel as though that their voice is not being heard. They agreed to a process where they thought that the servicemen, their families, and the affected parties would be heard. That process has been circumvented. So it's almost as if what they think, it doesn't count. And they're the ones who very frankly have to implement the law. They're the ones who Congress confirms to protect this nation.
Well, it's clear to me that what this administration intends to do is to turn our military, the finest military the world has ever known. There's never been any group of soldiers, sailors, airmen, guardsmen, Marines who are better educated, better trained, brighter, bigger, tougher, or more combat experienced. What they intend to do is to turn this military, the finest that the world's ever seen, into a laboratory for radical social experimenting. That's what this whole proposal is, Tony. What they've got is, of course, a law that says, Title 10, U.S. Code, Section 654, that says homosexuality is incompatible with military service. And what they're saying is, ignore the law.
I'm afraid that, as we've seen with so much of his agenda, he meant it when he said, shortly before he was elected, we are going to fundamentally transform America. One of the absolute pillars of the America we have known and loved is, as you know, Tony, the United States Armed Forces.
Yes.
And to the extent that you're on a mission to really radically change this country, you have to get the military transformed as well as the civilian society. In fact, David Horowitz, one of the primary figures in the left way back when, has said that in the day, it was an explicit part of the radical left's agenda to use both an issue that Lane's been working on for years, females in the military and gays in the military, to take down this pillar of our society. And I'm afraid that's what this president has in mind, yes, as an intentional agenda item.
Well, Tony, I think it's going to be very difficult to speak out in any way as with respect to your moral convictions on this issue. I think the order of the day is going to be silence. And my biggest fear is that people who are in leadership positions are going to be put in a moral dilemma. When one of these young men or women come to the leader with their concerns, the leader is going to have to profess moral neutrality on the issue. And in other words, they're going to have to put a face and stand for an issue that may be against their very closely held moral beliefs. And I think that moral dilemma, this law, is going to put leaders into a very serious moral dilemma that's unfair and unfortunate.
As I look at the health implications, I look at the medical risk. So I look at the medical risk for the military, and that was my job as a military medical officer, was to look at the medical risk. And when there's a individual who's a practicing homosexual, there's no question that they are at a significant medical risk. They have an increased risk of HIV, they have an increased risk of sexually transmitted diseases, and they have an increased risk of psychological disorders. Between 1993 and now, actually there's well over a decade more of information to actually highlight those risks, to define them. They're still there.
Well, Bryan, you're on the radio every day talking to folks all across the country, and I know this is an issue that AFR and you have been talking about. What are you hearing? What are folks out there across the country saying about this push by the administration?
Well, Tony, you're right. We talk about this frequently on my program, and I frequently get calls from active members of the military or family members of those who are active military. And I remember one call in particular. Now, we've talked this evening about what I consider to be the three major issues. Elaine Donnelly stresses these: recruitment, retention, and readiness. Is this change in policy going to improve our military readiness? Is it going to improve our ability to recruit? Is it going to improve our ability to retain our finest soldiers? And I think what we're clearly hearing from all these experts is absolutely not. This is going to diminish, it's going to decrease military readiness, recruitment, and retention. I remember one call in particular I got from a father who was retired military, served honorably, had 3 sons that were in the military. I'm very proud of their military service. It was in their family tradition, family history. He had a teenage son coming up through the ranks, and he said, he said, Bryan, if they change this policy, if they allow open homosexual service in the military, I am going to discourage my son from actually serving in the military. So, we're hearing anecdotally almost every week from people that are making it very clear that this is going to affect military morale, cohesion, readiness. And, as we've said before, the purpose of the military is to fight wars, is to kill people and break things so you and I can sleep safely at night in our beds. And so the only question is a change in policy going to help or hinder our military in carrying out its mission? And I think what we've heard tonight, Tony, makes it very clear a change in policy is going to hurt our military and its ability to carry out its mission.
Well, there's the RAND study is being taken out, and then a survey is being conducted by an organization called Westat. It's interesting. We feel that it's very important to know what the views of the troops are. So if they're going to carry out this review process that Secretary Gates has put in motion, it certainly should include a survey of the troops. The homosexual activist groups do not want the troops to be surveyed at all, which indicates to me that they fear what the result will be. But as Bryan just said, the survey is not asking the most basic question of all, which is whether troops think that the law should be changed or not. And there is a danger there that will skew the results, because people may not feel free to express their full opposition to changing the law if they assume that the law is going to be changed anyway.
And I think what we're seeing of supporters who want to change the policy, including a number of the homosexual groups, is they don't care about the issues that Bryan brought up and that Elaine brought up on readiness, retention, and recruitment. And they're trying to undermine the survey because they don't care what the troops say. And even Senator Carl Levin, who's ranking member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, pushed the overturning of this policy through his committee. He publicly said he half-heartedly supported the survey, but then said the troops need to understand they don't have veto power. What Senator Levin needs to understand is they do have veto power in the fact that they don't need to join the military. Yeah. We're an all-volunteer force. And if they think the environment of the military, and again, Bryan had brought up about how a number of military are legacy members, and our policy staff here, they put together some numbers. I mean, children of career military parents volunteer at a rate 8 to 10 times higher than their peers. Imagine losing that number of people in our current military if this policy is put through.
Well, folks, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. And this is a serious issue. A lot rests on the outcome of this public policy debate. But I hope you heard tonight that you can make a difference. We don't have to give in to this inevitability that the left will get everything that they want, that they can reshape America and their image. And certainly they should not be able to do this to the men and women who serve in our nation's military. Make no mistake about it. They are using the military to carry their radical policy agenda forward. We owe it to the men and women who have served and who are presently serving to stop them in their tracks. What can you do? Well, let me give you some very clear action steps. Number one, as we always do, I want to challenge you to pray. Never underestimate the power of prayer. And we need to be praying in our churches across America about this issue. We need to pray, and then once we've prayed, we need to stand up and we need to take some very specific action steps. One, I want to encourage you to call your U.S. congressman. You can also visit your congressman. The month of August, when they're home, there'll be town hall meetings. In fact, pastors, if you're watching tonight, I want to encourage you to host a town hall meeting in your church. Yes, you can do that in your church. And if you want to know how, feel free to contact us at frcaction.org, and we'll give you all the action steps you need to do that. Also, call your U.S. Senator. Both of your U.S. Senators. Call them and visit them as well during the month of August, and let them know that you expect them to protect our nation's military. Again, for more information, go to missioncompromise.org, sign the petition, and stand with us as we stand for our nation's military. Thanks for being with us tonight. God bless you, and may God continue to bless the United States of America.